One of the most reassuring things that has happened to me in my life, I think especially of the time when I was first married, when we would hit some sort of those early snags in marriage, I would talk to another woman who had been married a little bit longer than I would and I would say things like, gosh, we're experiencing this, and of course I had envisioned all these terrible outcomes to this discussion that we had or whatever, and one of my good friends who was quite a bit older than I would just kind of get this smile on her face and a gleam in her eye, and she would just say, oh, that's just so normal. And I would return back into the home and into the relationship utterly confident that folks had endured that kind of thing before. So I want you to have that gift going into this mentoring situation as well. The first stage of the mentoring relationship, and you'll see it highlighted there on your slide, is the building trust and establishing rapport stage. This is the stage where your role as the mentor's friend becomes so critical. So as with any friendship in the initial stages of the relationship, you're sort of gathering information. You're finding out what kinds of things you can for sure camp on, what you can always discuss with some degree of vitality and freedom with that person. You're finding out what their interests are and what they like to do with their spare time. I like to follow an acronym. When I'm getting to know somebody and I know that it's a relationship that I really want to invest in, I follow the acronym FORM, and I think of it in terms of I'm forming a friendship. The F stands for family. You want to find out about your mentee's family. You want to kind of climb into their world and wrap your brain around what's going on in their life. We're going to have a guest speaker in a little while. Chad Adamson is going to address some of the ways that you can climb into the mentee's world and find out who the people are, who the players are, what kind of an effect they're having on this child, and whether they're a positive or a negative influence in their world, that kind of thing. So F stands for family. And in some of these situations, the youth have not just extended family, but complex family systems. And so you want to do your best at asking questions about who these people are and how they're impacting your kiddo. The O stands for occupation. In the case of a K through 12 individual, their occupation is to be a student, and you want to ask them about their school and how they feel about going to school, whether or not they look forward to seeing friends when they get there, or are they one of those kids that sort of sits by themselves often and has to endure that at every lunch period. What are their favorite courses? Why? What do they enjoy doing during, say, their outdoor times, their recess times, that kind of thing? Are they alone? Are they feeling lonely? Do they feel befriended? That kind of thing. So their occupation right now is to be a student. What is the student experience like for them? How are they doing with that? How do they feel about their teachers? Do they feel appreciated with their teachers, or do they feel like an adversarial situation is with their teachers? Those are things that you want to find out about their occupation. The R would stand for recreation. That's a fun thing to talk about with anyone. Any young person likes to talk about how they like to spend their free time. Unfortunately, these days what you're going to get a lot back is playing video games and being on the computer. So what one of our goals is, once we determine that, once we ascertain that information, is to redirect a lot of that time and energy to other things that might be more beneficial to the child, that might do them more good. Getting outside, learning some sports, learning a hobby, that kind of thing. But recreational issues are huge and should be a major portion of your mentee's life. They should know how to play. They should know how to do age-appropriate, lighthearted things. And one of your jobs is going to be to find out what those activities might be and how you might arrive at some of those goals together as a mentor and mentee relationship. And the last letter of form is M, and that stands for motivation. Motivation. Why do they do what they do? Why do they enjoy certain things? What causes them to default to certain things? You can make observations. Say, I noticed that when we're hanging out with this group of friends of yours, you tend to navigate towards this individual. Tell me about that. Tell me what you feel like is going on in that friendship that works well for you. Motivations are an incredibly good thing to talk about with children, and you can get at them without using the word motivation. You can sort of poke around and see what's going on in the child's mind and heart. What is it that's making them tick? What's driving them? It may open up something for you to keep an eye on, to dialogue about, or even help them with in the future. The critical piece in this building trust and establishing rapport, the critical piece in this phase is consistency. It is the absolute determining factor when you're trying to build trust with a child. Consistency. Keeping your word. Honoring the confidentiality. Helping the child identify and attain goals, following through on that, following through on your promises to have fun together, studying your child, just being that sort of consistent, predictable presence. You're going to hear me say it many times, but the one thing that you don't want to ever do in this child's life is be surprising. They've had a lot of surprises, many of them already. What you want to do is you want to be the one that the rock, the one that they can sort of depend on. Every Wednesday I'm likely to see my mentor, barring illness or something unforeseen. Every Wednesday I'm going to have somebody to talk to. Every Wednesday I'm going to have somebody listen to me. I have some children in the middle school who have mentors, whose mentors come to lunch once a week. And I want to tell you, starting at 8 o'clock that morning, that child is in our office asking us if we've gotten a confirmation from the mentor that they're coming. And the kid gets a go to the head of the line pass, and it's all about the mentor's visit that day. And you can just imagine what would happen in a child's mind or heart if all of a sudden that mentor just decided that they were too busy and couldn't show up that day. That would absolutely send that child downward on a spiral, and we don't want to be about that kind of thing. And so you want to be consistent. You want to build that trust, build that sense that you're the one that for this 6 or 9 month commitment or this 1 year commitment is not going to go away. You're not going to bring surprises. Another interesting illustration is that you're going to help your mentee along the path that they need to be on. Here's what I mean by that. There's a famous quote by Michelangelo. I love this quote. He says, "Every block of stone has a statue inside it, and it is the job of the sculptor to discover that statue." Your child has hardwired into him or her some strengths, some attributes, some things that they're going to be passionate about, some talents, some abilities that maybe have never been recognized and probably in many cases never been fostered. Your job is to study that child intuitively and insightfully enough that you can start to camp on and go after that statue that's inside that piece of stone. And I'm not implying that children are pieces of stone, but I do believe that every one of them has an elegant statue in them that you need to find out about. And so that's one of your jobs. At this juncture in the relationship, you also are going to be dealing with parents. You want to be introducing yourself to the parents early on in the relationship, or the guardians, whoever is the appointed person in the child's life. The way we set it up with the Brookings County Youth Mentoring Program is you meet the child and the guardian or the parent with the school counselor at the same time, ideally, if that works out schedule-wise. And so you have met the parents. Early on, you want them to get a sense that you're going to be consistent, that you're committed. You also want to make sure they have your contact information and have several ways to get a hold of you if they should have a need to do that. That will communicate a lot of things to the family about your intent to be committed to this relationship. Now, we do supply paperwork to the family as well. You sign off on a commitment to us, which we expect that you'll keep. They sign off on a commitment to us also that we expect them to keep. And inherent in their commitment is the decision to give this relationship at least 6 months to work. That gives you an opportunity to get through the stages of the mentoring relationship and into a place where you're actually being productive. So what we do with the parents is we ask them to commit to the relationship as well. And we ask them to not have any no-shows. We ask them to get in touch with you if they set up an appointment and can't keep it. That kind of thing. And so it is a two-way street from that perspective. The parents have signed off on the relationship, and they are aware that their child or the child for whom they're responsible is getting a mentor, and that's not an insignificant piece. They have made a commitment to make this work. And so we can go back and revisit that with the family if the need should arise to do that. We can remind them of the commitment that they made, and I'm certainly willing to make that phone call, and so are the school counselors, to make sure that this relationship can really thrive. So you'll have some parents who are supportive, and for that we celebrate, and we're just delighted when the parents are on board and seeking the best for their children. We also have some parents that will, over the course of the mentoring relationship, become a little jealous, maybe try to undermine a little bit. What we call it is sabotaging. That could happen. It's not unusual for it to happen. If you're doing really well with the child may go back home and say, "I really like my mentor. How come you can't be nice like my mentor is nice?" Well, you know, it's a lot easier to be nice for a couple of hours a week than it is to parent a child, and we understand that, and so there's going to be a little bit of a competition set up there, and we'll help you navigate that. Most parents don't go there, but it has happened on occasion. Then you'll have the parents who become too involved. Maybe they try to micromanage the situation, or they want to be involved in your relationship with the mentee, especially if you're a mentor who's relating to a parent of the opposite gender, a single parent of the opposite gender. You want to be very careful to have boundaries in place whereby you're not engaging with that parent too frequently or too deeply or too intensively, even about the child. Your relationship is with the kiddo. We do not expect you to mentor the family, and so we want you to have those boundaries clear in your mind, that we don't call you to be too involved with the parent. We do want them to know that you're a steady presence in the child's life. That much they need to know. The other thing you need to be aware of at this sort of launching stage in the relationship is that this is probably going to be a cross-cultural experience for you. Maybe not racially, but probably socioeconomically, certainly educationally, if you're relating to somebody who's only in elementary school or middle school or high school. But we want you to be aware that this is a cross-cultural interaction that you're having. And there are a lot of things that we could do and say about familiarizing yourself with the child's socioeconomic status, for instance, that we don't have time to do during this training. But I can get resources into your hands that'll help you know how to better relate to children that are in their particular circumstances. And so I want you to be aware that you're going to encounter some things that seem odd to you, that seem a little unusual. When we lived in China, we had to keep saying to ourselves, as my family lived there for 4 months, we had to keep saying to ourselves, not wrong, just different, not wrong, just different. We had to remember that just because something wasn't exactly the way we would do it, it might have been representative of the fact that they came from a different cultural background, socioeconomic background, or a different heritage. So we want you to be prepared for that and try to steer clear of imposing your cultural norms onto a child who may come from a very different scenario than you do. When it comes to the child's safety and well-being, obviously we encourage you to maintain some high standards there. One of the main things that mentors have told us is that they come away from the mentoring experience with broadened horizons and a larger picture of humanity, certainly a better understanding of youth. We want you to have that benefit, but you can expect that as you push against the edge of your experience base, you're going to experience some discomfort. And we want you to press on through that. Go ahead and process that with the school counselor or myself or somebody else that knows about it, but we do want you to press on through that and make it in the relationship. Involving another adult in the issue does require the permission of the child. If they begin to tell you something with which you're uncomfortable, you need to alert them to the fact that if you are uncomfortable, you need to visit with the school counselor to get some idea of how to best help the kiddo. And if they won't continue talking to you at that point, maybe there's an issue there that we need to be aware of. And so you kind of have to respect their privacy and yet still know that if you're going to take that outside the relationship, the child needs to know that there are times that you need to call in somebody better equipped than yourself to respond to issues that are frankly bigger than the mentor relationship can sustain. So the one exception where you absolutely need to report to myself or the school counselor or to the hotline number on the screen, and I want to say that so that you can write it down. The Child Protection Services hotline for South Dakota is 866-847-7355. It does allow you to anonymously report a child that's being either abused or neglected. And I have recently called and done an anonymous report on a neglected child who was locked out of their house while the parents were inside. So you can make that phone call. You can report that a child is not being cared for well to that hotline. But the one time that you absolutely need to make the phone call, and it's not even an option, is when the child's safety and well-being is at stake, or someone in their world. That is, if someone stands to get hurt, either the child themselves or the child is threatening to harm someone. In other words, kids don't joke about that kind of thing. If they're talking about self-inflicted harm or if they're talking about inflicting harm on anybody, you absolutely need to make sure that somebody knows about that. Later in the video series, you're going to meet the school resource officer, Officer Joe Fishbogger, and he's going to give you a better idea of how to make those those phone calls and how to report incidents that you're concerned about. But for now, just suffice it to say that if a child is talking about hurting themselves or hurting someone else, that's not something kids joke about. You need to take it seriously, and you need to make a phone call to the school counselor or myself as quickly as possible.